Chaos is a ladder, but to where? Well, that's what we're going to try to examine here in today's video. I was having some trouble working on some other projects, and I got caught up watching a whole bunch of Littlefinger videos, and here we are. So let's dissect and compare a few popular Littlefinger theories, and potentially add some thoughts of our own, and see if we can riddle out just where all this Littlefingering is going. The most common and vanilla of the Littlefinger theories is the idea that Littlefinger is attempting to seat himself on the Iron Throne, or potentially to seat Sansa or another puppet on the Iron Throne and rule through them. I found two excellent breakdowns of Littlefinger's actions that seem to imply that that's where his sights were set. These videos were done by Alt-Shift-X and Factamundo respectively, so here's a little clip of each one.
We've never had a Littlefinger point of view chapter, and we only really see his actions indirectly. Maybe he'll settle down. Or maybe on a ladder, the only way to go is up.
It could be agreed, however, that Peter wants control over the majority of Westeros. The north through Winterfell, the east through the Vale, and the Riverlands through Harrenhal. But to what end? What does he want ultimately? Is his ultimate goal to sit on the Iron Throne? Or is it to be the power behind the Iron Throne?
Drifting further away from the vanilla and deeper into the tin, we encounter the idea that Littlefinger is either working for or against the gods. The two most interesting that I found being the idea that Littlefinger is attempting to bait and switch the old gods, or that Littlefinger is in fact an agent of the Great Other, and or has made some deal with the Great Other. And these videos were done by Preston Jacobs and Order of the Green Hand, respectively, so here again is a little clip of each one.
Littlefinger fancies himself Bael the Bard and Durin Godsgrief. He's trying to trick the world, including the gods. He's manipulating prophecy in order to get his Queen of Love and Beauty and rule. He thinks something magical will happen at Harrenhal, on the shores of the God's Eye, the place where the contract was signed between the Children of the Forest and the First Men. Littlefinger has bait and switched the gods.
They do have that make-believe line in the show from way back when George was actually still associated with it, that Littlefinger would burn the whole realm to the ground if he could be the King of the Ashes. And that does seem entirely plausible, that he makes a deal with the Great Other that he will pave the way for the others to destroy most of humanity if he can be the king of what's left.
Also in the relatively foil category, we have the seed is strong mockingbird theory, which we will go over as well because I think it's interesting to figure out if it might play in here somehow. I found this theory presented by the YouTuber Glidus or Gildus.
And there's this other thing some mockingbirds do, an idea that they pretty much stole from the cuckoos. Mockingbirds are known to lay alien eggs, which are basically children of their own in other birds' nests. These chicks will force the true-born hatchlings from the nest and take all of the food for themselves, forcing the foster parents to raise them as their own. Whoa. So maybe our sweet Robin is, in fact, a sickly mockingbird.
Why is everyone's voice so much cooler than mine? Now, it is pretty much universally accepted that Littlefinger caused the War of the Five Kings, was involved in the poisoning of King Joffrey, and is lying to Sansa about his ultimate goals, implying that his plans with Harry the Heir are not his true intentions. It is also nearly universally accepted that Littlefinger is engaging in some sort of debt scheme, enriching himself and impoverishing the realm. Pretty much all theories also imply that Littlefinger desires rule in one form or another as well. I guess for the sake of reference right now, we should go over a little bit of the life and times of Littlefinger, just so we know what we're talking about as we go forward. Without delving too deep into well-hashed territory, Littlefinger was born to an impoverished but landed family with Braavosi heritage located on the Fingers. His father fought alongside Hoster Tully during the War of the Ninepenny Kings, earning his loyalty and friendship. This allowed Littlefinger to be raised at River Run as a guest of sorts. Some of, if not the most pivotal events in Littlefinger's life occur at River Run. There is the love triangle between him, Lysa, and Cat. There is the duel for Cat's hand with Brandon. And there is the impregnation of Lysa by Littlefinger and the eventual abortion of the child by Hoster Tully. Shortly after the previously mentioned duel, Littlefinger was sent back to the Fingers as soon as he was well enough for the journey. After that, he was out of the graces of House Tully, even sending Cat a letter but never receiving a response. Lysa, however, remained devoted to him and secured him a position managing finances in Gulltown under her new husband, John Arryn. This all culminates in Littlefinger being brought to King's Landing and named Master of Coin under John Arryn and Robert's rule. So that's everything up until where our books start. And while our theories do not contest the order of events happening as they are presented, they do differ in how they believe the events affected Littlefinger's growing up in perspective. Preston puts forth the idea that much like Rhaegar Targaryen, a young Pattaya Baelish became enamored with prophecy and determined that he needed to marry a queen of love and beauty, and the queen he chose was a young Catelyn Tully. This prophetic need for a queen of love and beauty is to Preston what drives the early relationship between Littlefinger, Cat, and peripherally Lysa.
Littlefinger grows up with Cat and Lysa, where he falls for Cat and Lysa falls for Littlefinger. Littlefinger and Cat play Jenny of Oldstones, and Littlefinger decides that she is the Queen of Beauty. Her hotness, her red hair, and her family connection to Harrenhal seem to convince Littlefinger. However, Catelyn is betrothed to Brandon Stark, and so Littlefinger challenges Brandon to a duel. Now it would be almost impossible for Littlefinger not to see the parallels between this situation and Bael the Bard. Baelish is trying to steal a beautiful flower from Brandon Stark. Now this duel didn't go the way Baelish planned, so he has to rethink his strategy. He must become the Deceiver. Now Catelyn ends up marrying Eddard, but it would still be almost impossible for Baelish not to see the parallels between his story and Bael the Bard. Baelish is trying to steal a beautiful flower, Lady Stark, from the Lord of Winterfell, and so his planning begins. He manipulates Lysa Tully to help him in his career, and he eventually rises to Master of Coin.
This is a very well-informed, deep read of the text. However, I think the difficulty for Preston will be evidencing all the claims and connections he makes. A claim that I think is going to be equally as hard to evidence, if not more so, is the claim put forth by the Order of the Green Hand that Pattaya Baelish was visited by the Three-Eyed Crow during his recovery from the wounds he received dueling Brandon Stark.
Littlefinger almost died from his wounds suffered in his duel with Brandon Stark. And we know that the Three-Eyed Crow likes to visit those it has a use for when they are on the verge of death. Then it stands to reason that Littlefinger is capable of entering the minds of other humans.
Now, before you write this idea off as totally crazy, first think about Bran and what he's capable of. Why is it that Bran can enter human minds and his siblings, who appear to be equally powerful skin changers as he is, and everyone else, cannot? Well, we believe it has something to do with an experience unique to Bran's path to where he is. He was visited by the Three-Eyed Crow, and has unknowingly become his instrument. So, if Littlefinger was visited by the Crow when he almost died, it seems entirely reasonable that he could also have this ability, but has more experience with it and knows how to control it, so he can slip in and out of people's minds unnoticed.
It seems it is a more common perspective to take Littlefinger's life as presented at face value. And again, I would say this is the standpoint of the more traditionalist speculation around where Littlefinger's storyline might be going. And so we end up with three general perspectives as to what Littlefinger's life was about at this point. But which one is more likely, and can we rule any of them out definitively? Well, right off the bat, the Jacobs and Green Hand theories are going to be the most problematic, because they require the most assumptions to be true for the theories to work. It is for me rather difficult to accept the idea put forth by Order of the Green Hand that Littlefinger has been visited by the Three-Eyed Crow. This is because the assumption is based on belief and not supported by direct evidence. Their only real evidence for Littlefinger being able to telepathically influence people is the fact that Bran can telepathically influence people, the connection between the two characters being that they both experienced a near-death experience.
I know that we have talked at length about the symbolic ties to demons in his name, compared his methods to the Three-Eyed Crow, pointed out that Bran can control Hodor and may have inadvertently slipped into Mira's mind for a moment, but a lot of you are probably still not convinced. So, we are going to end this video with one last example of what Bran is capable of, since the Three-Eyed Crow helped him open his third eye.
So while the theory does bring up some very interesting points, most notable of which is the fact that the Three-Eyed Crow's relationship with Bran is an abusive relationship in the same way that Littlefinger's relationship with Sansa is an abusive relationship, I would say we can be relatively sure that Littlefinger has not been visited by the Three-Eyed Crow. At least, not yet. I think the biggest hurdle for this theory is the fact that it is very difficult to ascribe this level of power to Littlefinger based on his actions. When we're exposed to the Bran chapters and the Varamir chapter, we learn that skin-changing another person is something that even the most powerful of skin-changers do not generally believe is possible. And we know that being a Bran or a Bloodraven is a rare, once-in-a-lifetime, super special genetic anomaly style kind of thing. And even if we set inherited skin-changing ability aside, Littlefinger has very little to offer the Three-Eyed Crow or any other telepathic or skin-changing intruder who might seek to use his potential powers. Unlike the Starks or Bloodraven, Littlefinger has no political importance and has very little political value as a pawn in the playing of the Game of Thrones or the manipulation of the meta in any sort of way. So apart from not being a skin-changing receptacle, he's not exactly the kind of person a skin-changing mastermind would want to be a receptacle, as he has very little potency in the Game of Thrones as a player himself. The Order of the Green Hand's belief about the Three-Eyed Crow visiting Littlefinger is heavily based on the idea that the Three-Eyed Crow serves the Great Other. There would need to be an extraordinary amount of evidence to support the idea that Littlefinger is a skin changer, or has been visited by a skin changer, or has been visited by the Great Other, or some other force like him. Not seeing any of this evidence in front of us, I think we can safely put this aside. When it comes to entering dreams, however, there are other telepathic means that are not genetically linked that are available to the average person so long as they can get their hands on them. For example, Marwyn gives us the skinny on glass candles and tells us that they can be used as tools for the invading of dreams. So the idea put forth by the Order of the Green Hand that Littlefinger is invading Ned's dreams may be worth considering.
Much like was the case in other dreams in the story that were magically penetrated, Robert heard his thoughts and answered them, calling him a stiff-necked fool who's too proud to listen. Well, whose advice did Ned refuse to listen to? Littlefinger's, regarding what he should do with the power Robert has bestowed on him as Hand and Regent in the matter of the succession.
Now, it is exceedingly unlikely that Ned would trade his honor for his life. In fact, he said as much later when Varys visited him in his cell. Now, Littlefinger had no way of knowing that Varys would go and sort of strong-arm Ned into doing exactly what Littlefinger wanted him to do, albeit for a completely different reason. Littlefinger wanted Ned to take the deal so the seeds he had planted in Joffrey's head could come to fruition, and send the realm into a state of complete and utter chaos.
While I think this is an interesting idea, and while I do subscribe to the idea that Littlefinger wanted Ned Stark to take the deal and think his life was going to be spared so that he could then betray him, thus causing Ned to forsake his honor before death, I again have a major problem with the idea that Littlefinger is entering the dreams of other characters simply because we never see any evidence of Littlefinger in any other dreams, and we do not see any of the tools or apparatuses or experiences, chemicals, potions, what have you, that we see in other places or used by other characters who are involved with dream manipulation. From Wine of the Warlocks, to the incense at the House of the Undying, to werewood paste, to glass candles, some kind of medium is generally required for people who aren't of a certain special telepathic ability to be able to interact with the minds and dreams of others. While I realize this probably isn't an in-universe absolutism, you would think we'd see something around Littlefinger. You would think we'd see a glass candle. You would think we would see Wine of the Warlocks. You would think we would see something that indicates he is using telepathic powers to manipulate dreams. To go back slightly, I would add this same argument to the idea that Littlefinger is inherently born telepathically powerful like Bran, and that's why the Three-Eyed Crow would visit him. We don't get any hints or inkling that Littlefinger might have those powers. Littlefinger is presented as a potent and manipulative person. However, he's presented as a potent and manipulative person because of his intellectual abilities. He has neither the traits nor tools of a telepathic manipulator. Additionally, the proposed theory is kind of convoluted and doesn't exactly make a lot of sense to me personally. If Littlefinger is infiltrating the dreams of Joffrey Baratheon as is proposed by Order of the Green Hand, in an attempt to convince him to kill Eddard Stark once Eddard Stark has accepted the Lannisters' deal of taking the Wall, and Littlefinger is then infiltrating Ned's dreams to convince Ned to take the Lannisters' deal to go to the Wall, why isn't Littlefinger taking the shorter alternative of simply convincing Ned to hold on to his honor? If Ned holds on to his honor, he'll be forced to eat the sword of Sir Ilan because that's what happens when you don't take the wall. It just seems like a longer route to get to the same place. If he convinced Eddard Stark to keep his mouth shut and just tell the Lannisters to fuck themselves, Eddard Stark would die. And if his desired outcome in convincing Eddard Stark to take the Lannisters' deal is to have his secret mental puppet Joffrey, who he's been dream influencing, kill Eddard Stark, then, again, it just seems like an awful long way to go. Moreover, if Littlefinger has that level of influence and mental infiltration, why isn't he able to take control of a lot more people? And why isn't he orchestrating a lot more events? Why aren't we seeing Littlefinger in a lot more dreams? Okay, so Littlefinger wasn't visited by the Great Other, and we don't think he's some kind of telepath. What about the Preston Jacobs theory? Could he, like Maester Marwyn, while lacking a glass candle, still be interested in the mythology, lore, and potential magic of Westeros? Well, initially I would say that this seems a little bit easier to prove than, say, a connection to the Great Other, who at this time is currently not proven to exist. However, the scope of Preston's claim is pretty large, and so I would expect to see an equally large body of evidence or proof for examples of Littlefinger engaging in the types of activities and behaviors that are being ascribed to him. Preston lays out a lot of connections and a lot of examples. However, he likens Baelish to Rhaegar in his pursuit of prophecy. Maybe I'm being confusing with what I mean here, but for example, with Rhaegar Targaryen, we get a lot of characters talking about him reading books. We get a lot of characters describing him being bookish. It's something that's really well known about him as a person. I can't recall anybody in the books describing Baelish as a particularly prophecy-interested or bookish man. Mysterious? True. Prophetically interested? I don't know if we have that kind of evidence to say. When we talk about Dorne or Marwyn and we think about characters who read a lot of books and push books on other characters, and then who are also engaged in things like prophecy, glass candles, dragons, and that kind of stuff, it comes to my mind at least that we see them around a lot of books and engaging in discussing prophecy quite a bit. Now, one could argue there's a lot of hidden factors and ambiguity around someone like Doran Martell, but I would say that we do see Doran Martell using his secret, hidden-y, booky smartishness more than we see Littlefinger ever engaging in any secret-y, hidden book smartishness. Doran associates with bookish prophecy people and pushes books on people. Littlefinger, as far as we know, isn't pushing books on anybody, and we don't see him talking prophecy with anybody or looking to find prophetic texts. I mean, it just seems kind of strange to me to imply Littlefinger would be that interested in prophecy in general. Littlefinger has amassed an enormous amount of money and should, in theory, if he's really interested in delving that deep into mythos, be able to have acquired quite a large book collection. However, we don't see the Littlefinger library. Preston Jacobs has a lot going on here, and it probably would take several videos to dissect even just this one series in its complete, absolute entirety. But the base claim that Batyr Baelish was enraptured by prophecy at a young age and has been pursuing it ever since, to me, is difficult to support. For example, Preston Jacobs proposes that Batyr Baelish is trying to emulate Bael the Bard. He wants to kidnap the Rose of Winterfell from the Lord of Winterfell.
Now, it would be almost impossible for Littlefinger not to see the parallels between this situation and Bael the Bard. Baelish is trying to steal a beautiful flower from Brandon Stark. Now, this duel didn't go the way Baelish planned, so he has to rethink his strategy. He must become the Deceiver. Now, Catelyn ends up marrying Eddard, but it would still be almost impossible for Baelish not to see the parallels between his story and Bael the Bard. Baelish is trying to steal a beautiful flower, Lady Stark, from the Lord of Winterfell, and so his planning begins.
He's had like 15 years to do this, though. You would think that with all of Baelish's powers and abilities, that if he really was trying to fulfill this prophecy and make it happen, he could probably have just bought Harrenhal out from under the House Went, and hired somebody or engaged in some kind of scheme to kidnap Catelyn. I also don't see Littlefinger pushing a lot of prophecy on Sansa during his indoctrinations of her. And you would think that we would see Littlefinger doing a bit more of this with his mental manipulation. He's brainwashing and changing the mind of like a 14-year-old girl. You think he'd be slipping in that prophecy shit a bit more overtly if he was trying to get her to be involved in a prophetic fulfillment. What we hear and see of Littlefinger's early life, as limited as it is, doesn't imply any sort of prophetic leanings. And the fact that he lags for such a long time in attempting to steal a Stark and then picks a different Stark to steal, while having his hands in so many other pies, kind of implies to me that his main goal does not center around the kidnapping of a Queen of Love and Beauty. So what the fuck, random internet guy? You don't like Preston Jacobs' explanation? You don't like the Order of the Green Hands explanation? Let me guess, you think the vanilla explanation is stupid too, don't you? Well, I do think it requires some modifications, and we are going to have to get to those later. But for now, I'm going to have to ask you to wait patiently until part 2, with the promise that the video is going somewhere, and we will eventually slog our way through all these theories and get to some theorizing of our own. So I thank you for sitting through this enormously long video, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get it out, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that I will see you next time for part 2 of Chaos is a Ladder. But to where?